Welcome to the BS Your Way Through Life show. I'm so happy I have a new friend on my show today. Her name is Leigh Trupin. I hope I said her last name right. But she's been on a journey and a journey for discovering God. So this is going to be a wonderful conversation for anyone who really needs this. I'm super excited. She's written a book and she has a website and everything. And yeah, let's get this party started. Welcome,
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Lee. Hopefully, I didn't botch your last name too bad.
No, Leigh Trupin. That's fine.
Well, anyway, yeah. So tell us your journey. So, like, obviously, you mentioned that you weren't really raised with God, and you kind of found Him on your own. And
I did.
yeah, take us through that a little bit.
Okay. Well, like you said, I did not grow up knowing God. Didn't grow up around people knowing God. Actually, my mom was Catholic, and I've seen her read the Bible, but I've never read it myself and anything like that. I went to church here and there, but nothing that got me into knowing who God was. So I knew a little bit about Him, and then I moved from New York to Vegas, and all of a sudden, I'm being introduced to God by none other than God Himself. So when He introduced Himself to me and I knew He was real, I wanted to learn more about Him. So I ended up doing what I thought was the right thing to do by going to church and reading the Bible and, a fellowship with who I thought were mature Christians. And I kind of wanted to learn more. And the more I got into it, the more upset I got with God, I guess, because I got myself into, not only did I not grow up with God, but I didn't know the devil either.
Right. So
And
when you first found, sorry to interrupt, when you
no,
first
it's fine.
found God, how did you find God? Like not being
Okay.
raised with God. So what was the way that God introduced himself to you? What was
So it's actually in my book, Dear New Believer,
Woo,
Love God.
okay. So
But what I ended up doing is I moved from New York to Vegas and I had this little dog. And man, was that dog a barker? So what I ended up doing was I was getting complaints about him. So I ended up I had my daughters I have twin daughters and they were, I don't know, 6, 7 at the time. And we went shopping for a bark collar. And I ended up going first into PetSmart. And then Walmart was right next to it. And I wanted to compare prices. So I didn't think I can bring my dog into Walmart. So I left him in the car. I said, I'll be right back. So when I grabbed my daughters, we went into Walmart. I thought it was just going to be a quick price check. And then I'd make my decision and we'd be on our way. But as I'm in Walmart, I get this unbelievable sense to go check on my dog. And I couldn't shake it. And I just thought it was weird. And I said, no, I'm going to wait. Cause I did call one of the workers to help me with the collar. And he's told me to wait. And I'm waiting there. And I'm like, I feel it. I got to go check on this dog. And I'm trying to push this away. And finally I couldn't anymore. And I started, without knowing why, I grabbed my daughter's hands and I started running out out of Walmart in kind of a panic and didn't realize why. And then close to the exit, I see this dress and I'm like, oh, I got to look at this dress, right? It's cute. Maybe I'll buy it.
to a woman.
Yeah, right. And I'm thinking, okay, maybe if I like this dress enough, I'll buy it. But I'm holding this dress and it's like, I can't get this feeling out of me. Go check on your door. And it was like intensified. So I just threw down the dress and we're running out. And then I had this feeling, all right, let me leave my girls against on the sidewalk while I go run to this car, not knowing why. So I said to my daughters, I'll be right back. Stay right here. I'll be right back. I'm just going to go check on the dog. So I'm rushing to the car, not knowing why. And as I get closer, I start to see, oh, I know why I'm here. So I see the chain that I left on him, and I see that it's completely straight. It's like in an angle, but it's completely straight. So the dog was hanging. he
My
somehow, I had
goodness.
an SUV at the time. He got into the back of the car, all the way in the back,
Right.
and then he jumped over the seat, and the chain got caught, and he's
Oh,
hanging.
no.
So now I'm really panicking because I see the drool all over him.
Oh
His
my
eyes were bloodshot. I
god.
thought the dog was
That
dead.
was
I
that
did. I
was
thought the dog was dead.
bad.
So I opens up the car door, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna unhook him and run it back into PetSmart because there was a vet on site.
Right.
So I picked the dog up, and I didn't know what was gonna happen, and I start running, and all of a sudden I see him kind of coming out of it.
Coming
And
back.
I kind of stayed there because I didn't want my daughters to see what I
Yeah,
saw.
no, which was
I
just
really didn't want to see it,
yeah,
but
which is
if I
why you
had
were
to run,
impressed to leave them
yeah, if I
miraculously,
had to run past them to bring the dog in, that's what I was going to do. But
right?
I just stood there and I said, all right, well, let's see what's going to happen. So the dog slowly came around. His name was Chachi. He's no longer with us, but
Oh,
but and I was just so glad that nothing terrible happened. And I stood there in disbelief, not only holding this dog, looking at what I saw, but I'm like, what was that? How did I know to go check on this dog? Like,
right.
how did I know that?
What?
I know that I had this feeling, but where did that come from? And I kept asking myself over and over and over again. And I don't remember exactly how I came to the realization. Maybe I spoke with someone, maybe I walked into, I don't remember exactly how, but I realized, whoa, there's a God and he talks to us
Yes.
because he got my attention. He got my
Sure did.
attention.
Yes.
And that's how I started wanting to learn more. I thought that was pretty cool. Like I was fascinated by that. Mind you, after that I didn't leave the chain on the dog again. It
Right?
took me a while. It took me a while to leave the dog in the car alone again.
I
But
bet.
when he did, I made sure he didn't have anything around his
Chain,
neck. And
yeah.
I was usually in and out anyway.
Yeah, right,
But
of course.
that particular time, I was like, oh my God, so I started wanting to learn more about him, and I started reading books on him. I started reading the Bible. I started going to church. I started talking to Christians, and um, I was slowly but surely changing within. And I kind of had a tug of war with myself because here I am, and I didn't know that God changes you within either. I didn't know all of this, and he's changing me and I'm fighting him. And it got so bad. The battle between he and I got so bad that, like I was saying before, I didn't even know that a devil existed.
Right.
And it got to the point where I'll never do it again. But I got so angry with God for how my life was turning out because it wasn't turning out great. I didn't just walk into Christianity and everything was great. That is not what happened. I don't even know if that's what I expected. Honestly, I don't know what I expected, but I didn't expect what I got. So, and the details are in my book. It's a pretty interesting story. And I eventually one day just was so angry with God and I wanted to just get away from me. Like, seriously, just I want nothing to do with you anymore. And I looked in the mirror one day and I said, it can't be any, I'd rather follow the devil because he can't hurt me any more than you have, basically. And believe me or don't believe me, but that I actually became possessed and didn't know that that was possible. And I went through a big ordeal, and I'm battling the spiritual world, both good and evil, that I didn't know existed. And I was going to the church begging for help, and I was doing everything that the church was telling me to do. You got to read your Bible, you got to do this, you got to do that, and I'm doing everything that I thought I should be doing so I can be set free, and it wasn't working. It just wasn't working, and I'm just like, what is going on? What else do I do? And people would tell me, well, it's because you don't love God, it's because you're sinning, it's because this, it's because that, you don't trust God. And I'm thinking, no, I don't love him, no, I don't trust him, I don't know him.
Right.
So I felt that now I'm getting even angrier with him because I felt like I'm being taught that because I don't love him, because I don't trust him, I'm just going to be kept in the turmoil that I'm in. And that made me
Right.
hate him.
Right.
Man, did I hate him. I hated him. And then, but I tried to, I went to deliverance ministries and all of these places that I thought I could be set free, the things that you see on TV. And I'm like, I'm doing everything. What more can I do? And I finally became so desperate that I eventually just called out to him personally. And once I did that, he said, now let me show you what I can do. You don't need the church. You don't need to read the Bible regularly. You don't need in order to and not that I am by no means telling people don't do these things. What I'm saying is that he taught me I don't need to do these things in order to develop a personal relationship with him. And that I should stop being so dependent on the church and on people that know him and become dependent on him.
Yeah, that is a good point you bring up because like so many like because church is important and I obviously believe like going to church is good. But if your whole world or your testimony is based on the church and the people in the church, it's going to go away. It's not going to work. You have to have your testimony based on Jesus Christ. And the reason why we go to church is so that we can glean and support and love and help each other, right? But like you don't need to go to church to know God.
Right. And what I have learned is what's that saying that it's actually in my book, you are the church. Like
Yeah,
once
right?
God comes to you, you don't need a building.
You don't
You
need
know
a
what I'm
building
saying?
to know God. You don't
And
have to
not one person, I
exactly.
swear to you, not one person ever said to me, Leigh, did you know that you can speak to God directly? Did
Right.
you know that you can have a personal relationship with him? Every single thing that I learned through, and I don't like the way that he taught me, but nobody could have taught me any different than nobody could have taught me the way that he did, because
Right.
everything I learned, he got my attention the only way he knew how to get my attention.
Right.
I do believe that everybody's experience is
It,
different,
it is.
and I'm not
God.
saying that.
Yeah. Just like with children, I'm sure your girls are so different from each other and you speak to
Yes.
each one differently because they absorb information differently and whatever. We are like that and God knows that. He knows each one of us. So he speaks to us on our level. He speaks to us on our level and where we're at. He meets us where we're at.
And it's true. And I know a lot of people, it's like me. I don't believe until I see. That's why I never really believe. I kind of sort of believed in a God, but not to the extent that I do now.
Right.
But it's because I was shown, because I was experienced. The same way I now believe, and I'll never call on the devil again. I learned my lesson. And God must have been like, you know what? This is the only way you're going to learn. This is how I'm going to teach you. So, and he did. And as bad as that experience was, that had to be the worst experience I have
Oh, of
ever gone
course.
through, to the point where I wanted to kill. I literally, and I thought that I really wanted to commit suicide. I wanted to end my life. I said, I can't do this every day. It's literal torture.
Right. Because the devil doesn't care about you.
No,
No.
no, he
So,
doesn't.
yeah.
And I allowed him this control over me. And then as time went on, God also taught me, what did you know that you can fight the devil too? Did you know, so he taught me all of these things that I just didn't know. And started becoming upset with the church. Why isn't the church teaching this stuff?
Right.
Why didn't I get the help that I needed? I was alone because, even my family, I mean, thank God they believe me. But my
Right.
brother is a lot like, you know what? I'll be honest. I don't know if my brother believes my whole story. I don't know, because we don't actually, he's never read my book. But
Right.
he knows that something wasn't right with me. He
Right.
knows that. And he asked me about it, and I told him. And, he never said he believed me. He never said he didn't. But I know my parents believed me. And, but they didn't know how to help me.
Right.
My daughters, they're both 23 now, but at the time, they saw stuff. Like I said, I could be myself sometimes throughout the day, and
Right.
sometimes throughout the day I
And sometimes
couldn't
you're
control
not.
myself. And when
Yeah.
I couldn't control myself, I couldn't control myself.
Yeah.
and they saw me struggling, but I never really spoke to them about it. So I didn't have a community. And I came out of this, and my desperation now is to help people, is to form a community. I actually want to start my own ministry and have a community that I didn't have, one that doesn't force, rituals and religious beliefs on someone, but that also teaches and educates not just about God, but about the devil, because the church never taught me about that either. Now, I will say the church has said, oh, the devil comes to steal and kill and destroy, but they never went into depth about what you can get yourself into if you're oblivious to him like I am. It's like the church doesn't
Yeah.
teach to new believers.
Oh yeah, he's cunning. There is a book of scripture, and I forget the verse reference, but it basically talks about how the devil doesn't he's not the kind of person that just, like for example, like if someone were to come and just grab your wrist and start dragging you away, you'd be resistant right away, right? But then if they came and they coaxed you and talked to you and slowly grabbed your wrist and slowly, you'd be like, you find yourself following them without
Without
realizing, right?
realizing.
And that's how the devil works. He doesn't just grab, he's just like, I'm going to get with you where you're comfortable. And then I'm going to get you to lower your standards a little bit. And then I'm going to get you down here. And that's how he works, you know? And it's just like a lot of people don't realize that. So they get slowly, there's a scripture, I think it says slowly led down to hell or something, or there's a quote. I don't know. I can't quote it exactly, but yeah, he's tricky. And so being aware of that is important so that you
It
don't
is.
fall
I
for it.
believe wholeheartedly knowing about the devil is just as important as knowing about God. And I'm not saying to put to give the devil the importance, but it's
Yeah,
so
right.
important for your soul to know that he can be dangerous if you allow him. See,
Yeah,
I literally called out to him because I didn't believe. I thought, I've seen the movies. I've seen, and they were entertaining and I enjoyed them, but I think that was real? 100% not.
right.
Never did I believe I would ever, ever, ever find myself in that situation. And I will say, if you've ever seen The Exorcist, and I did, I enjoyed that movie.
No, I can't do horror.
I will never watch it
Because I
again.
know it's real.
I,
I know that some stuff is real, and I'm like, can't
well,
do
you know
it,
what? I
can't do
didn't.
it.
I didn't, and I used to do Ouija boards. I used to do tarot cards, so
Mm,
I knew. Well, I know now. I know
right,
now. I didn't know it then. I know that those things opened up the door for the devil's attack when his time was right.
right,
But I didn't know at the time when I was doing them. I thought it was harmless fun.
right.
But if you ask me to do that to this day, I'm telling you, I will do nothing. Nothing intentionally anyway. I'm still a sinner. I still make mistakes. I'm still flawed. But and I look for God's correction. But I will never intentionally again open up any doors to ever allow the enemy to attack me like that, because that was brutal.
Oh
That
yeah,
was brutal. And I'm telling you, it was movie style brutal. It was, a lot. You look at that movie, The Exorcist, and I will say, yeah, a lot of it was exaggerated, but so much of what happened in that movie did happen to me. The
that's
only difference
scary.
is that's a 2 hour movie. I'm talking about I went through that turmoil, that torture for 4 years.
Yeah. Well,
Now it
in
wasn't.
the Bible, I if I'm not if have you ever seen The Chosen? Have you ever heard of The Chosen?
I have.
Okay. And the
I
first
haven't
episode,
gotten into it
okay.
though.
So the first episode, I've only seen the first or second episode. And in the first episode, and I didn't know this because I've read the Bible, but then, I haven't really read it all the way through. I'm more like sporadic reading it all over the place. But I didn't know, I think, hopefully I'm not quoting this incorrectly, but Mary Magdalene was actually possessed when
Yes.
Jesus found her. And he, you know, he, you know, I can't think words. Oh, they're coming, I promise. He cast the devil. That's the word I want to cast. He
Yes.
cast
I've
the
heard
devils
that.
away.
Yes.
Yes. So like this is real. Like Jesus himself, when he came down, he cast devils out of so many people because they had gotten possessed. So, and it's, and your story about you getting possessed, I'm sure you're like, Mary, I know how you felt, and Jesus, even though he's not physically here, he still has the power to cast out the devils, but we have to call out to him for that to happen. And
And
when
I
we
do believe
yeah.
that he uses, like, I don't trash the ministries that,
Oh
the
no, he
deliverance
definitely
ministries.
uses people. Yes.
I do believe that God uses people to help
Absolutely.
cast out. I believe that
Absolutely.
wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
But I believe in my case, it was because I became so dependent on the church. I became dependent on people who knew God rather
Right.
than God Himself. And I think God, actually, I know God was saying, "No, Leigh, become dependent on me."
Yes.
Me first,
Me first,
people
exactly.
second. And
Yes.
I didn't understand that. That's why I became so angry. I'm like, I am doing everything the church is recommending for me to do. And I don't understand what's happening to me. I mean, my life was a mess. It was an
Right.
abs- me. I was acting different, and I couldn't understand why. And I was like, if this is what it's like to follow you, no, I don't want this.
Right.
Now, would I ever want to go through that again? Absolutely
No.
not. But I'm telling you, the lesson I learned from it, the relationship I gained from it, and where I want my life now to go, especially being someone who didn't grow up with God, I now hope to one day have a full-time ministry. And I think this is the start of it, telling my story. And I eventually, like you, I don't know how to do it yet, but I'm reading up on it. I'd like to start my own podcast.
Yeah, that would be wonderful.
And
Same here.
I want it to become like a full. I'm telling you, when I say the desire I have to help people, and not just new believers,
Right.
it's people who've been with God before that maybe had been conditioned that you must do these things.
Right.
And you know what? And I never want to, turn people away from what they want to do. But
Right.
my story is, you don't need these things in order to develop your relationship with God. Develop your relationship with God and let everything else fall into place.
Right.
But when I asked, I'm telling you, I came across two things, and I'm not going to use names, but I spoke with two pastors, one years ago, and I asked, why don't you teach these things that I am suffering from? Like, why don't I hear this in church? And his response to me was, because we assume people already know. That didn't sit well with me because I didn't know. And I'm
Right.
thinking that can't be the answer. Like, why?
Right.
And I'm talking about now recently, I got to know another pastor, and I asked him again because he actually runs a church.
Right.
And I said, well, why don't you guys teach this in your church? And I swear to you, his response was, and I'm not saying that, you know what? I don't know if it was personal, but I will say that he said, can I be honest with you? The church itself, and the church in general, wants to keep people dependent on them, not on God. That blew my mind to hear that
Wow.
from a pastor who runs his own church.
Oh my goodness.
I heard that and I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Now, I would hope that's not true. That was his response to me.
But
I,
you would hope that that's not true all cases.
well, yeah,
Yeah.
and and my hope is to get more people to realize you can have your own personal relationship with him. And I do realize people need, like me, people need their own experience with them. You can't force, like when I was trying to learn from fellow Christians about why I'm kept in this turmoil, why can't I be set free?
Right.
And they were trying to teach, and I believe wholeheartedly they wanted to see me get set free. I believe wholeheartedly they wanted to help me, but their help was based on their experience with
Yeah.
God, the things
Yeah.
that they have learned about him from himself. No one ever
Right.
said to me, start with God. No one ever said that to me. Learn from him.
Yeah. Learn from
So
him.
everything I know, everything I can teach wasn't taught in church to me. Wasn't taught in the books that I read. Nothing. It was taught by God himself. He was the best teacher I could ever have.
And he always will be.
Yes, and and everything I'm speaking about, I learned from him. Now, what I will say is the pastor that that had said that they want to keep, that churches, I'm not going to use the word him, that churches want to keep people dependent on them, on churches.
Right.
He did say, when I told my story, and I told him what I wanted, what my book was going to be about and what was in my book, and he did say, what I can say is a lot of what you are talking about is in the Bible. He says, I can back up everything that you say from the Bible. He says, I believe wholeheartedly you're being led by the Holy Spirit. So that made me feel good. That made me feel good because for a while, I wasn't even like I just wanted to commit suicide because I couldn't take the turmoil. I was
Right.
like, am I going crazy? Do I need to
Mhm.
commit myself? Like I had all of these doubts about what was happening,
Right.
but I'm telling you what I said, I can't. I know what I'm feeling. I know what I'm going through, and it was just,
It was
man, it was
turmoil,
a
so
mess.
much turmoil. Yeah.
But one of the best phrases I've heard is, what does he say? And I believe that's what, and not just me, but I believe anyone who comes to God has this, turn your something into a testimony, turn your story to a testimony or
Yes.
something
Yes.
like that.
Yes. Turn your story into a testimony. Yeah.
Yes. And that's what I want to do. And I'm telling you, I want to be that person I never had. And I want this book, the book that I've written, I wanted it to be the book I never read that I needed to read, because I
Right.
have tried to read book after book after, because I'm very, yeah, I tried to read the Bible, but I couldn't relate to it. I was too new to understand the Bible. And so I picked up books that I thought could help me, like Christian books
Right.
and as I'm reading them, again, they were just too advanced because they'd have Bible verse after Bible verse in their book. And I would get lost because I didn't read the whole entire Bible. I didn't understand. I needed help. So my book is very simple with relatable stories, with, not stories from the Bible, although, I did put scriptures in the back to back up everything I've said. But I used my stories, and I didn't, I didn't throw all the Bible stuff in there so that you lose track of where the story is. That's
Right.
what happened to me. I'm like, okay, I get this part of the book. Now I'm losing it here. And it just, what happens to the people who are starting from the beginning?
Right.
Where is it? How
Yeah.
are they
Someone
being
who's
taught?
starting in the beginning.
Yeah,
Exactly.
because every church I walked into, it's like I don't get me wrong, I enjoyed it. I really
Right. Oh, of
I
course.
enjoyed the message, I
Yeah.
enjoyed the music, I
Community.
enjoyed the
Yeah.
people,
Hmm.
but it was still too advanced for me. It was
Right.
just too advanced
Right.
for me.
Yeah.
So
And
I'm starting at the very beginning, and that's kind of, and like I said,
you want to help those who are
I do
who, like don't know God
tremendously.
and really like here's the absolute basics. You know,
Yeah.
like me, I grew up with God in my life. I grew up in church, right? And something that was taught to me by my parents, which I am so grateful for, is just like, because for a while, children, they follow the examples of their parents and they kind of ride on their coattails. And you have the testimony of your parents, but it's your parents' testimony. Eventually, my parents, they taught me throughout my life is eventually you need to know for yourself. You can't say, oh, I believe it because my parents believe it. You have to actually know for yourself who God is and gain a testimony and a personal relationship with
Yes.
God, not based on your parents, not based on your neighbor, not based on your pastor, or bishop, or whatever. It's got to be directly between you and God. And, and I think I was around 14. Yeah, I was 14. I was around 14 and I just decided, you know what? I I feel like what I'm doing is good, but then I still feel like I'm riding the coattails of my parents. And so I need to start seeking, a personal relationship with God that just is
Yes.
me and Him. So I started praying regularly, like, hey, help me to know that, like, the scriptures are true and help me to know that, all the things that I'm being taught about God, that they're true and like, and gaining my own testimony. And at first I was frustrated, and I think it's important people know that sometimes the answer doesn't come right away because it
Right.
didn't for me, right? apparently I wasn't ready for some answers. So I was like, okay, I'm not getting an answer. And I honestly got frustrated. I was just like, okay, fine, whatever. But I'm like, well, I'll just keep doing what I'm doing because I'm not miserable. So I'm just gonna keep following what I've been doing. And then I remembered instinctively when I was 17 that I was just doing laundry. It was so random. All of a sudden, it was like someone was speaking inside of my head, and it was just like, you already know what's true, that it's true. And I was just like, I do. You're right. I do already know that. And it was just like, it was so quiet. It was so simple, but it was so peaceful and it was so happy. You know what I mean? It's just, it was beautiful. And that was my experience of like realizing that, I had a personal relationship with my Heavenly Father, and, and that what I believed about Jesus and how he's my savior is so true. And so anyway, yeah, it's important that everybody has their journey and gets their own testimony.
And I believe it's important that, and like I said, my story is not for everyone. God won't teach everyone as drastically as he had to teach me,
Right.
but
But
it's
some of
also
us
how
need the
you
drastic.
it's
Right.
how you react to his teaching. And I
Yeah.
was very, don't tell me what to do kind of thing, very, very,
Right.
I got this. I don't need your help. I was very resistant, very, um, I was resilient. I wasn't learning. And he was like, well, I guess this is the way I'm going to have to teach you. I could not have learned any other way. I could not have
Right.
learned if it wasn't from my personal experience. And I believe
Exactly.
everyone needs that. Everyone needs their experience with God.
They do.
And
Yep.
and the way he teaches you is the way he teaches you. So it's not a one size fits all. Your
No,
relationship
it's
is
not.
very different. Everyone's
Exactly.
relationship is personal and it's different. Um, so that's why I'm saying, like, that's why I got so frustrated with the churches, because it's just like a one size fits all teaching.
Right.
And
Exactly. And it's
and the
so like,
same thing with the books that I've read. And it's like, where is the beginning? Where is, okay, you're teaching people come to Christ, get baptized, great things, great things. But then it's like you kind of let people fend for themselves,
yeah. Yeah.
especially people, and there are a lot of people that have grown up with God and maybe still don't know that they can have their very own
That is
personal
so
relationship
true.
with Him.
Cause like I can't tell you how many friends I have that like grew up basically the same way I did, but then they didn't get the message
Right.
that you need to have your own personal relationship with God. It just because so and so does it this way doesn't mean that
Nope.
you have to do it that way, type of
Nope.
thing, right? So and so that's a very valid point. And on that note too, I hope you don't mind we switch gears for a second, but
No.
like people with religious trauma who actually had like dramatic, like I've known people because I served a mission for my church and it was wonderful. But there was a lady on my mission who her father punished her in the name of God.
Oh.
He utilized the scriptures for, and so obviously what happens to this woman, right? She becomes to be like, ugh, the subject of religion is obviously going to be a nails on a chalkboard for her, right?
Yes.
Because she was abused in the name of God. And and I know of so many others that were, and it's just it's tragic. So how can we speak to those people and help them realize that that God was never in that, ever in those moments, ever. He's never in those moments when people are abusing them in his name. So how can we speak to those people? I think your story could resonate a lot with those people, and they're, just like of you know, how you found God on your own and realized I don't need, you know, a preacher to tell me how to believe in God. I can speak to God directly. And how can we,
And I think it's important for others to know, however it is you feel about God is okay. Like,
yeah,
even after my story, okay, I'm going to say this and it may offend people and people may get pissed off at me, and it's not, but it's my truth. I still do not love God. I don't have love for him. However, through my relationship with him, through my turmoil, through all of it with him, I no longer hate him. I learned to have respect for him. I like the guy. I actually think he's pretty darn funny. In my relationship, he's taught me some, that he's got a sense of humor, so I'm finding out this fun part about him. But what I don't like when people say is, like with me, when I was like, when people say, well, you're going through this because you don't love God. Love him. I mean, at this point, I hate him. Yes, that's how I feel. And they made that seem so taboo. Like, how dare I? But you know what? It's how I felt because I
How you
didn't
felt at the
know
time.
God.
Yeah, because you
And
didn't
maybe I
know.
still don't know him fully because I don't feel that love for him. But God's okay with that.
God knows that you're taking baby steps.
And actually,
Yeah.
it's so funny you say that. It is so funny you say that because that is how he teaches me. He teaches
Yeah.
me little steps at a time because that's how I learn with him. Now, that's not how everybody else learns with him, but that is how I learn with
But
him.
that is how you
He
learn.
pulls
Yeah.
me in step by step because that's how I learn with him.
Right.
Actually, the name of my ministry, and I have it written down. I want it to be called Baby Steps with Christ.
Baby steps with Christ.
So, because that's how he teaches
Yeah.
me.
Right.
And, everybody learns with him differently. Everybody
Mm.
feels differently about him. And it's okay. And I don't want people to say, you're wrong for feeling the way that you do, because you're not.
Right.
However it is you feel about God, go to him.
Yeah.
That's always my thing now. Go to him.
The
You
beautiful
think
thing
he
is,
couldn't handle the fact that I hated him?
yeah, he can
No.
handle it. He's got big shoulders.
And he does. And and everybody was like, how dare you say that? But it's how I
Right.
felt. Are we not supposed to be real because he's God? Are we
Right.
are we all supposed to feel the same way, learn the same way, do the same things? No. I'm sorry. I don't love him the way that you do. As a matter of fact, with what I'm going through,
Your
I
relationship
hate
is
him.
still developing.
Yes, and that's what it is. Let my relationship develop through him and me. Don't put these things in my head. And the other thing that makes me cringe when I hear it, because I hear people say, "Oh, you're unworthy. You're unworthy. You're unworthy." And I'm
That's
sitting
not
there
for them to
thinking,
say.
"I'm sorry?"
They don't have authority to say that.
No, and I'm thinking, and I thought that. I was like, God really believes that everybody is unworthy? Why do I want to work so hard at getting to know this guy when I don't want to be in a relationship with anyone who finds me unworthy? You
Right.
think I don't want to be in a relationship with God if he finds me so unworthy? What's the point? But
Yeah.
I will tell you this, in my relationship with God, not once in my relationship with God has he made me feel unworthy.
Yeah.
Those
That's
weren't
really good.
his words. They
Yep.
were words of people. And I still have to. I had to, and I still continue I have to learn the difference. What is
It's
God
yeah.
saying to me? Because I'm telling you, I believe wholeheartedly he's not telling me I'm unworthy. I don't believe there is anybody that is unworthy of anything from him. Nobody.
We are never unworthy for his love. No matter what we do, he loves us. We don't even have to love him for him to love us. There is a verse of scripture that says, and his arm is stretched out still. It talks about all these horrible, like no matter how uh, you know, tragic this gets or horrible this gets, his hand is stretched out still. Even if you're rejecting him, his hand is always stretched out. He loves us unconditionally. Unconditionally. There are no conditions to his love. Absolutely not. Like, humans, we have such a small I'll get that perspective. There we go. We have such a small perspective of how big his love is. And I love that you said that, like, people are saying you're not worthy. We're always worthy for his love. We're always worthy for his love. He gives it freely. We as humans, we're flawed. Maybe we don't give it freely, right? Like we put conditions on our love, but God does not.
Right. And we get it wrong. You have to understand, I'm sitting there trying to learn about God in every way that I thought I needed to. Meanwhile, now I feel like, well, I'm in my position because I don't love him. I'm in my position because I don't trust him. And now I'm unworthy to be set free.
Right?
What did I get myself into? That's what I kept saying. What did I get myself into? Because now
Right.
at this point, I know the spiritual world is real because I was smack dead in the middle of it. Like it or not, I was smack dead in the middle of it. Smack dead in the middle of my relationship with God, developing a relationship with God, smack dead in the middle of learning that the devil is true because he's in me. And here I am. Well, this is the way I'm going to live the rest of my life because I'm so unworthy, because I can't love this God who I feel is, I thought he was punishing me. I
And
thought,
that's
I
what the
didn't
devil does.
realize.
The
And he
devil
wasn't
convinces you that
punishing me,
you're
he
not
was
worthy.
teaching me.
Right.
There was a big
Mhm.
difference. And I
Right.
mean, I don't, I hate the way that he taught me, but I walked out of that situation so much stronger in my relationship with him, in my knowledge of him, and in my knowledge of what I was pulling, what was around me. Although again, I don't bash the church. I
Right.
don't bash
No.
and I don't. And I'm saying, if that's for you, that's great. Do what you feel you need. If that's where God is leading you, please go. But what I'm saying is, I don't want anyone to feel condemned for
No.
not going, for
Exactly.
not doing the things that they should do. Because you know what? You don't need that stuff to develop your relationship with God.
Nope.
My thing is, I've learned, develop your relationship with God first, and then what is he telling you to go to church? If he's
Exactly.
telling you to go to church, go.
Yep.
But you know
Yep.
what? If he's not telling you to go to church, it's okay. Don't let anybody make you feel guilty, because
Right.
I thought this is what I had to do to be set free. I didn't realize there was so much more to God than I ever
There's so
knew.
much more. So much.
And the only one that taught me was him. And the way, I didn't know that he can teach you. I didn't know he can speak to you. I
Right.
didn't know you can speak to him. I remember, and God, we're going back years ago. I don't even think my daughters were born yet. I don't even think they were born yet. But I was with their father, and I remember sitting in the living room with him and his mother, and they used to go to church, and they believed in God, but they couldn't get me to believe. And I remember one day she said to me, God answers prayers. And I was like, the hell he does. But I did, I thought it was so ridiculous to me. It was so ridiculous, but I just didn't know. Yeah, it's true. But it's the people that make following God and Christianity sometimes a turnoff. And I was turned off for quite some time, because I didn't know, other than, well, I heard all my life, you got it, not all my life, but people that knew God, oh, you got to go to church, you got to be. So that's all I knew. So when he introduced himself to me, and I wanted to learn more, that was the first thing I ran to. I didn't run to him first. I ran to what I thought I should do first.
Right.
And then if you're not doing that, people are like, well, then you're not really saved. Well, who are you to judge anybody's salvation?
Yeah, exactly.
Are you kidding me? How dare you judge anybody's salvation? The only
Yeah.
person that judges salvation is God.
Is God. Exactly. Yep.
And then people used to tell me, well, you can't be possessed if you're a true Christian. And I'm thinking, this doesn't make any sense to me. I sat there before I got myself in this position. I sat there and I wholeheartedly called out to God because I wanted him in my life.
Right.
And now I'm in this position, and you're telling me that I'm doing this wrong? I don't understand. How am I doing this wrong? I was so confused, and not one person helped me in the way that I needed.
Right.
And I hope to change that. That is my desire, to build a ministry and to change that.
And
You know,
especially, when you're building a ministry, letting people know that the love, really focusing on how much God loves us and there is no conditions. And I think a lot of people need that, because I think a lot of people, that even fall out of following God, because just like you, people told you weren't worthy. People said
oh,
that there's conditions. So they stop. So they just quit because they feel like, well, I'll never measure up because he's God. He's not asking you to measure up. He's just asking you to do your best. And even if you don't do your best, he's going to love you the same.
I agree. And I also believe it's also how you respond to him. If you're
Yes.
someone like me who, oh man, was I was like so resistant, and he needed to teach me tough because I wasn't getting it. And not everybody needs to be taught that way. And not everybody needs
No.
to be, go through the drastic measures that I went through. But I do believe that you've got to go through something with him in
Right.
order for him to change you from within. Because that's the other thing. I didn't know that God changes you from within. I thought, I'm going to call out for God. I'm going to be saved and I'm going to live this great life. I did not
That's nope.
know what I was walking into. I didn't know because nobody teaches you that. I just hear how wonderful God is and how peaceful people are who know him. And I'm thinking, well, that is not how I started.
Right.
It's not
Believing in
how I
God
started.
does not take away our trials of life. It just helps us
No,
them.
no. I really believed that once I became a Christian, that I was going to just walk out of this life, walk in the life of God, and that's all I needed. I didn't know that I needed all this garbage pulled out of me. I understand now.
Yeah.
I understand now, and there are things that I used to, behaviors I used to do, I used to have, or habits I used to have years ago that I would never do now,
Right.
because He's changed me so
It's
much.
been changed.
But
Yeah.
that process was torturous. It was painful. But what I will say is coming out of that, well worth it.
Oh,
Well
well
worth
worth
it.
it every time. And the beautiful thing is like sometimes God literally needs you to go through these hard trials and he's harder on you because he has a mission for you. And you can't help other people unless you know how certain things feel because there's certain people who need you. And so sometimes we go through trials because we're meant to help somebody else and God knows we can handle it. He never gives us anything we can't handle.
Man. But I will say I'm glad I never followed through on my desires to commit. I swore I was going to commit suicide.
Well,
I
I'm glad
swore.
you didn't either.
I'm glad too. I'm glad too because I didn't think I'd ever come out. Honestly, I never thought when you're going 4 years, day after day after day, in such turmoil, it's like I can't live like
Yeah.
this anymore. And had I not had my daughters, I probably would have. But they were the only things that kept me going through. Um, but man, if it's difficult to know why you're going through what you're going through because you don't know the outcome like God does.
Right.
And there is no way that I thought in the beginning that I would come out wanting to start a ministry,
Right.
wanting to be help to people, writing a book. I never thought any of that. But the life that I want to step into, I want to step into with him.
Right.
And I believe wholeheartedly one day I will love him. I am so open to him now, so open to his correction of my behavior, which I wasn't before. So open to his changes, the changes that he wants to make in me. I no longer, tell him I got this because I don't. I have nothing. But I have a good relationship with him. It may not be what other people expect me to have, but you know what? I'm no longer doing what other people expect me to do. I
Right.
did that. I did that, and I turned out being wrong. I was being led wrong. So now the first person I go to for everything now is God, and I wait for Him to lead me. So if that's not an accomplishment in itself, if that I don't know what else is, but that's kind of what I wish the church would have taught me, and they never did.
Yeah.
And like I said, that's my story, but I know that there are people led to the church and I think they should go. But all I'm saying is, and I know it makes people angry, but all I'm saying is that it's not a must. That's all I'm saying.
You don't have to go to church to
Yes.
have a relationship with God.
Yes.
Yes, God's relationship with you and with Him are so personal. So, to all those out there who had religious trauma, you can have a healthy, beautiful relationship with God, and you don't need to do this certain boxed in way to do it. And for those of the who do go to church, because church is a beautiful thing. You have a community, and the
Yes.
purpose of it is so that you can help uplift and bear one another's burdens, right? So there's a scripture that says, like, bear one another's burdens that they may be light, mourn with those that mourn. And church, gives that opportunity, but we're human, and sometimes, like, especially with your experience too, is like you're being told certain things. Judgment happens more often than we'd like it to.
Oh, I
And
was so judged.
I gotta so, like, in my own hometown, there was so much judgment. Like, you didn't feel loved by your neighbor going to church. But the only reason why I kept going to church is because I felt like that's what God wanted me to do. And I had a testimony with Him. And I went to church for God, not for me, right? I went for me because, like, a lot of people in my hometown, not nice, right? But then we can sometimes get so particular in church. So my brother-in-law went to church one day, and they just had moved to the area, and so this was their first day, like, going into church, and he couldn't find his Sunday shoes. He was wearing a suit or whatever, and this is how silly things can get, and people need to stop doing this. So he had to wear his tennis shoes to church, and there is a lady there who's just like, those aren't church appropriate shoes. Who cares?
Oh my
Like, how
God.
ridiculous is that? I was just like, it's like, stop it. Stop it. Like, that happened to another friend of mine where he came in a t-shirt. He hadn't been to church for a long time, and he was looking for that good feeling. He's just like, he decided to go to church because he was trying to find himself again. He wore a t-shirt to church, and he got criticized for it, and he never came back.
You
Right?
see? No, I
That kind
believe
of
me, I
behavior is
understand.
not okay. It's not okay. So, like, going to church is good. We need the community, we need the love, but we can't be going to church and then start judging on each other. That has to stop. And that's the reason
No.
why
And what
you're
I want to
so
build is
passionate.
my desire is to build a community, and, not necessarily within a church setting. But, what happens after Sunday?
Yeah.
What do you spend? That's what I want. There's a whole lot.
Yeah.
What are you doing throughout the week to keep
Yep.
that because you know what? I used to love, don't get me wrong, I loved going to church because I got fired up. Like, I
Right.
felt that I felt at that, I felt close to him.
Right.
The closest I ever felt to God was when I was writing my book. That's the closest I ever felt to him. But
Because
in
you were
church,
in your power. You were like,
yes.
you
But
did
when
it.
I did go to church on Sundays for that hour and a half, whatever it was, I felt close to him, but then I would leave. And then that was it. That feeling was
Yeah.
gone.
Yep.
What are we doing throughout the week to,
Yeah.
to keep in communion with him?
Oh, I love this
So
question.
and that's what I want. It's like, okay, I went to church, but then I was kind of going on, I'm still kind of going on my journey alone. I didn't have that community outside the church.
Right.
I loved to talk to the people in the church because they knew about God, and I can talk to them about things that I couldn't talk to at the time my current friends, because
Right.
they didn't grow up knowing God either. And I couldn't talk to my family because we didn't grow up like that. But I had that community an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours during the week, during that Sunday, and then that was it. What about after? What about those people that
Yeah.
need you after?
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I'm hoping that God is bringing me, that He's growing me to be that person that I'm telling you, be that person that I didn't have, write the book that I never read.
Yeah.
So that's my journey. I never even listened to podcasts, and then I had my first podcast interview, and now you are my second, and now I'm thinking I want to start my own. I want to
Yes.
build this into a community. I
Yes.
want to do a ministry kind of thing. And I'm hoping
Yes.
that people who really need to hear my message, that people who really need to hear my story, to know you're not crazy. Whatever it is you're
Not
going
alone.
through, I'm not here to judge you. I just want to help, because that's what I needed. That's what I
Yes.
needed. And
So you're going to give
although
those what you didn't get.
yes, and although don't get me wrong, I know now that yes, God was there to help me. But when you don't really know Him,
Right.
you kind of need people around you. You know, not to judge, not to tell you
Right.
what you're doing is wrong, but you do need a community. You do
Yeah.
need a community, and and I hope to build that.
You hope to build that community so
Yes,
that a community of
yes.
understanding, not judgmental, and letting people work on their own pace without like the pressure of like, come on, speak things up.
Absolutely. And however it is your relationship with God is going, however you feel about God, whatever
Right.
it is okay. Just
Right.
let God meet you where you are,
Yeah. That's
you
right.
know, like I said, like you said, learn at your own pace.
Yeah.
But learn from God, and not necessarily from people.
Yes. And when you hear wise things from people, take those to heart and be, you always have to ask, like, are what they saying true, God? You ask God. He'll tell you yay or nay. So,
And I believe people's testimony. I loved to hear
oh,
people's
me too.
testimonies because
Yeah.
at that point, at first I didn't. Well, I wasn't going to church because I didn't have that. But when I
Right.
when I found out God is real, that this is not a joke, I loved hearing how people's testimonies. Even when I was in my turmoil, I loved hearing how people came out of theirs. I was happy. I was genuinely happy for them. And I'm like,
Right.
well, when am I coming out of mine, God?
Yeah.
It's been
When am I
20 years.
coming out of mine?
But now I'm out of it, and now I have a testimony to give, and a book that that explains at least my what
Yeah.
I went through and what I learned from it. But yeah, I'd love to hear people's testimonies.
Me too. And God's timing is he works in his own time and he
Yes,
knows
he
best.
does.
And so sometimes it's hard to wait on that, but
Yes,
but
it
it's
is.
worth it in the end. It's so worth it. It
I
really is.
agree.
Well, Lee, it's been such a joy talking to you.
Thank
And
you.
I really, my prayers to you that your message can reach those who need it and that they can know that they're not alone. God loves them unconditionally. And that sometimes we just need those baby steps, and he understands that. He
We
gets
do
it.
need baby steps, and if I can give if you guys
Yes.
are
Oh,
interested, it's
can
on
you?
Amazon. It's called Dear New
Yeah,
Believer
it's
Love
on
God.
Amazon. Great.
It is on Amazon, Dear New Believer Love God. I have a website, Dear New Believer Love God.
I'll put I've got your links from your email. I'll put those in my show notes.
Okay,
You
and
can click
then
right on it.
my social media.
Yep.
Can follow me on social media. But if anyone would like to get in contact with me right now, the best way, until I learn how to develop other ways, is through my email. There's a contact
Perfect.
on the bottom, and people can get in contact with me that way. But I
Perfect.
hope this has helped somebody. I really
Yes.
hope that this has helped
Too.
somebody. That's just my desire.
Because like the
That's
whole
my
point
desire.
is just bringing someone closer to God because that's how we're able to like get through life. Life is
Yes.
uh, so
Well,
hard.
I appreciate you taking the time and allowing me to be on your show. I really
Yes.
do.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day
Thank
and
you. You too.
and God bless you.
Now, will I get a link to this so
Yes.
that I can?
Oh
Okay,
yes. When the
perfect.
show goes up and everything, I'll send you all the links. That's my
I appreciate
it's
that.
like and I usually have it up within like usually the day of. But if not the day of, then it's usually like the next day or at least 3 days. I don't usually let
Okay.
3 days go by before I have the show up. And yeah,
Well,
so
I
expect to
appreciate
see that
it.
email. All right. Thank you so much, Lee.
Thank you.
Have a
Bye.
great day. Bye.